Hey everyone, just letting you know that this video may contain spoilers for the books, comics, and games within the WarCraft franchise.
You have been prepared.
Greetings everyone, I'm the delicious and mythical GriffinMuffin. And I'm here to talk about World of Warcraft Before the Storm by Christie Golden. In this video, we're going to discuss the novel by Christie Golden as a novel itself, discuss its merits as a piece of literature, but then also in the second part discuss more about the impact this book has on the expansive lore of the World of Warcraft. If that sounds like the sort of nerdy thing you're into, you've come to the right place. So let's not waste any time and get into it, shall we? The main characters in this story include Anduin Wrynn, Genn Greymane, Sylvanas Windrunner, Nathanos Blightcaller, the Prophet Velen, Alonzus Fowl, Turalyon, Elsie or Velcinda Benton, and Kalia Menethil, the older sister of Arthas Menethil. There is a whole bunch of other characters that I've left out, but they're not as important to the main plot of the story. So, this story is actually placed in the events directly after the World of Warcraft expansion, Legion. Both sides, the Horde and Alliance, are reeling from the massive conflict of defeating the Burning Legion and imprisoning their leader, Sargeras. As he was being drawn into his prison, however, he managed to have one last hit and stabbed the planet right in the Silithus. Following this, a powerful magical ore started surfacing called Azerite. So for this story, Anduin and Sylvanas are the main focal points of the plot. They are the two characters that drive this plot. Anduin has the desire for peace and understanding during such a difficult time, while Sylvanas sees this more as an opportune time to put the Alliance under her heel, for whatever reason. We'll discuss that more a bit later, however. But first off, I do have to say that the characterization of Sylvanas in this novel makes her more embittered, and my impression is that she's at breaking point, so to speak. And it's really hard to know where this came from. It's hard to know where it came from and to see what was the tether that led to the desire for war and destruction of the Alliance. I mean, like, there have been hints of it there, but in this novel it really portrays that she really wants them dead. I mean, there are hints of how she thinks that the Alliance will never truly accept the Forsaken and that peace is just not compatible for that reason. I have a hard time buying that. However, it seems that her character development seems a bit not genuine. Maybe they're trying to work something in that we don't know about, or maybe they're just trying to recreate what they did for Garrosh back in the day when he became an actual villain. And the thing is though, I don't hate it. Like, it doesn't actually overall affect what I think of the character. I still think she's a great character, it's just hard to kind of place how she's come to this conclusion. Next, we have Anduin. Anduin Wrynn, yes, the boy king. And I have to say, if I wasn't an Anduin fan before, I am now. I have to say, like, on top of talking about Sylvanas, but also talking about Anduin, these characters in this novel are really well built up. They have an excellent build-up and fulfilling story arc. You clearly see how these characters develop. And it's just awesome. It feels good, you know? It's so satisfying to see. In particular, I liked how the change in Anduin and Genn were effectively communicated. You know, for Anduin, we have at the start his resolve for peace and an understanding between the two factions, while we have Genn, who's the cynical war hero who doesn't believe anything will change from this. The writer, to me, has nicely set a theme of this novel to be the fear and prejudice that we see in our world to be reflected in Azeroth. But it's done in a deft and not too on-the-nose way as it can be sometimes done in other franchises, in my opinion that is. The fear of the Forsaken is a huge element in this thematic melting pot of goodness. The theme of peace is the hardest to obtain is also ever present in this novel as well, with that being the sole drive of Anduin's character. As a matter of fact, one interesting part of this novel that I found was that the protagonist and antagonist were not strictly Anduin and Sylvanas. Anduin was actually the protagonist, while it was actually the prejudice and challenges that Anduin came up against in his vision for peace and understanding that got in the way. That was the direct antagonist. It wasn't even really Sylvanas that really got in his way that much. until the very end. Yeah, a lot of the opposition and a lot of the antagonism of the plot comes from his friends and advisors like Turalyon and Gen. This novel is not about a typical good and evil clash, it's the lack of hope for change. That's the real problem. The lack of open-mindedness for the people of Stormwind. That's the problem. In general, I thought this book had a really good writing style. I would describe it as descriptive and emotionally investing. But it's not descriptive in the way that it gets bogged down in the details. It communicates description in scenes, and it can communicate through other means, such as thoughts, sounds, minute details, and say, in one part there's a bit where someone approaches Anduin's throne, and instead of kind of describing how the throne looks, like what it actually looks like, it's told through the person's perspective of what it feels like to approach such a throne, and from that, your own mental image of the throne kind of goes, oh, it would be this regal looking thing, and that's good writing, you know? You don't want your reader to be bogged down in the details. I almost don't want to say this because it's slightly embarrassing, but there was a point where this book made me cry. I can't say which character died, but I'll just say that because that's the thing. This book has such a good descriptive way of writing that it pulled me into that scene. I vicariously felt what Anduin was feeling in that scene, and it just was so powerful as to the effect that he was having, and I lost it. I think that's a good indication that the book is well written. I felt the emotions of a fictional character. What I like the most about this novel is it's not just a story about defeating a giant space demon. It's about exploring the fears and mindsets of the people in Azeroth. For me, this allowed a deep introspective look to some of my favorite characters in this universe, and allowed to tell also on top of that an awesome story. Overall, this book gets 5 out of 5 muffins. Just flat out. I can't think of anything really that bad. There's things I don't agree with, but the way it's done doesn't make me hate it. I highly encourage you to read this book if you're a fan of the WarCraft mythos. Well, not myth. If you're a fan of the WarCraft lore, I'd highly recommend you read it. Not just on the fact that it's a good setup for the next expansion, Battle for Azeroth, as of making this video. It's also just a really good novel, so I highly recommend you read it. I'd also love to know your thoughts down below in the comments, and perhaps to give me a chance to gush more about this awesome, awesome book. Now we've talked a bit about the book, let's dive into the lore, shall we? What we've learned, what happened, and where does it take the overall story of the world of Azeroth? Spoilers are definitely ahead, so be wary everyone. By far, since reading this book, as I mentioned, I am a bona fide Anduin fan. A lot of people see him as a wimp or whatever, but I honestly think he's the leader of the Alliance people need. And he's also just an interesting kind of character. But what he sees in the world, looking for that moment of peace, is something that is kind of a white balance against the murky tableau that is the ever-present conflict in the world of Warcraft. It creates this kind of element that this ever-present conflict is actually kind of grave. I don't know, it just sets a nice tone to it. I think he's also an important character because I'm eager to see what he becomes. Will he become more jaded? Will he succumb to the rest of the world and be like, yep, there's no chance for peace, let's have at it, Or is he actually going to be one of the main people that will eventually bring some form of peace to Azeroth? And more importantly, I'm interested in seeing what happens to him in the expansion, Battle for Azeroth. So let's talk about the other main character of this story, Sylvanas Windrunner, the new war chief of the Horde. Now, I'm not entirely sold on her new part as a character, particularly as war chief. As I'm reading her sections in the novel, I kind of go, wait, when did she become such a bitch? It's not entirely out of left field. She's kind of known to be a schemer and a manipulator, but never to the extent that I've seen her in this, at least as far as I can remember. Maybe there's some event in Frozen Throne or whatever that I missed that kind of tells this character a bit more, but yeah, honestly I'm a little bit lost. I mean, she's always a character that kind of doesn't, understand the distinction of honor and fairness. She uses underhand tactics all the time. But never to the point where she goes, I want to burn down Stormwind and raise the dead. It's like, what? Where did that come from? The act of going to Stormwind and burning it down to raise the dead to populate her own people, that's evil. That's blatantly evil. I mean, there's a paragraph I've bookmarked that demonstrates this perfectly. I'll get it out now. Alright, I found it. Here we go. Chapter 3 of the book. The Horde was tough, strong, battle-hardened. Its members would recover far more swiftly than the Alliance races. They would need less time for the things she had cited. Crops, healing, a chance to pause and restore themselves. Soon enough, they would thirst for blood, and she would offer the red life fluid of the Stormwind's humans, the oldest enemies of the Horde, to slake their thirst. And in the bargain she would increase the population of the Forsaken, for all the humans who fell with their city would be reborn to serve her. Would that be so terrible, really? Yes! Yes, it would be terrible! Oh my god! Like, no, Sylvanas! That's evil! That's very bad! Very bad! It's widely interpreted amongst lots of medieval fantasy stories that raising the dead is considered unholy and wrong. I get it, though, okay? Maybe because she's doing this all for the Forsaken, for her people. And she feels responsible for them, so she has to do this. However, you can still do evil shit, even though you're doing it for a greater purpose. It doesn't just nullify it. Like, I don't know, say, burning down the world tree. But I don't know, you gotta admit that's pretty fucking badass what she did right there. I'm not saying I like it, I don't like where this is going. Maybe they're doing something to try and break what Nixium called the Dragon Ball Z effect, where, yes, Warcraft does has to keep on making up new villains to replace the older, more powerful ones. And one of the most successful stories I've ever done is with Garrosh. That they created a great villain, and it was entirely understandable of how he got from A to B. And then you also think of people like Orgrim Doomhammer, which is in Warcraft 2. When you actually look at his story, you kind of go, whoa, he was really drastic. He really resorted to drastic measures to save his people. But that's the thing. That's what made the Horde, is that Orgrim Doomhammer did what it needed to be done. So Orgrim Doomhammer saved the Horde from the control of the Legion. Well, at least the control of the demons and Gul'dan and all that sort of stuff. And the Shadow Council, I should say. And he liberated them. But through very, very drastic means, by killing a whole bunch of people. Is he regarded as a villain? Sort of. But he did it for his own goals. And maybe that's how we should be looking at Sylvanas, maybe. Just maybe. I don't know. Something to think about. I really like how they included in this novel more deep lore characters, such as Alonzis Fowl, who founded the Order of the Silver Hand, and Kalia Menethil, the oldest sister of Arthas Menethil. I really did like what happened with Kalia Menethil throughout the book as well. That whole paradox of what they're hinting at of how a Menethil can only right the wrongs of a Menethil, alluding to how Arthas destroyed Lordaeron, and that Kalia is the one to actually correct that mistake. I really liked what they did there. I'm eager to see her pop up in Battle for Azeroth and see what part she plays in that story. So let's pick apart the main events of this novel and analyze them. Right? Let's do it. Shit. Anduin believes that the prejudice of the Forsaken can actually be dispelled. This happens after he sees Alonzis Fowl, the fabled priest order of the founder of the Silver Hand. He is a Forsaken who is not affiliated with the Alliance or the Horde, but serves the Light instead. Anduin's fear of the Forsaken is kind of gone, because he realizes that, hey, they're people too. They're humans, so they're just in a different form now. Not only does he see him as just another human, but he sees him as just another person, as a priest. He believes that this can be done for everyone else. Alonzis then introduces Kalia Menethil. Later on, Anduin's butler, named Will Benton, becomes ill and dies. That's the character that I mentioned before that made me tear up. In which Will, as he's passing in the afterlife into the light, he doesn't see his wife Elsie. And that hints at that maybe, 'cause she died in Lordaeron, that she's a Forsaken in the Undercity, and that turns out to be the case. After this death, Anduin is steeled into organizing a gathering in the Arathi Highlands between family members of the humans of Stormwind and the Forsaken of the Undercity, in particular, the members of the Desolate Council. Elsie Benton is actually known as Velcinda Benton, and is a part of the governing body of the Desolate Council. This council was formed in the absence of Sylvanas Windrunner to manage and administrate all the goings-ons in the Undercity. Through Alonza's Foul, Anduin and Sylvanas arrange a gathering in the Arathi Highlands, halfway between Thoradin's Wall and Stromgarde Keep. They meet up, and the gathering takes place. Anduin sees that this day will plant a seed of hope in everyone, while Sylvanas, watching from Thoradin's Wall, sees this as an opportunity to bring the rejected Forsaken into her fold and be like, see, this is what happens when you trust the humans. And also she took pride in the fact that, the Forsaken will never think of doing anything like this again. As events go on, Kalia Menethil, who is present at the gathering as a support person, decides that now is the time to save the few of those that are defecting from the Forsaken to Stormwind. Well, at least for those who want to live amongst the humans once again. Sylvanas sees this, and she slays all 19 of the Forsaken Council members, even killing Kalia, believing that she was going to usurp her throne, or that she was a pawn of Anduin in some way. So, the gathering was a disaster. Kalia, however, afterwards was raised as a light-bound Forsaken by the Naru Sara, and pledges to help the people of Lordaeron, whatever that means. Anduin realizes that peace is still worth fighting for, but Sylvanas is not a part of that future where it happens. And Gen surprisingly sees how the Forsaken are not all monsters. I hope you stuck with me there. I really cut down some of the vital details, just got to the point really quickly, I apologize for that. But let's start it again, let's start analyzing a little bit. What does that mean for the lore? What does this event do for the entire world of, Warcraft? Essentially, this book opens up the mindsets of the human and the Forsaken, how they see one another, and it does a great job at contrasting human and Forsaken lives. It paints a picture that the Forsaken as a community really has it rough. I mean, Alliance races want them dead because they're abominations, even though they didn't ask for this existence. However, they have a second chance at life and want to live it. Wouldn't you? And their future as a people doesn't look good. Maybe the Forsaken are simply just a doomed people. Maybe they're not. Maybe they were just an unforeseen after effect of the Scourge invasion. And their time is short-lived and there's nothing that can be done to stop it. Just a thought. The introduction of Kalia Menethil into the lore is a very interesting idea. To me, her revival as a character is sort of Christy Golden's way of saying, hey, you remember Arthas, right? He was really cool. Yeah, he was really cool, right? Here's a character that kind of reminds you of him, right? He's really cool. Remember that? Remember Arthas? He was cool. Yeah, he was cool. At the gathering, when a Desolate Council member actually recognizes her and approaches her saying, we need you now. It's time. And she decides to embrace that idea of aiding the Forsaken, which admittedly was very dumb, because it could have started a war. And then she was killed by Sylvanas. But she is brought back as what could be described, as I mentioned before, as a light-bound Forsaken. So, what does that mean? I mean, will we see more light-bound Forsaken? Is this a thing that the Naru can do now? Is this another allied race? Because, that's how we think now. But I'm more interested in, is she going to rival Sylvanas for the throne of the Undercity? She does say, however, that she's not fit to rule. And from her example at the Arathi gathering, this is pretty spot on. She's not ready to lead. She's ready to do something, to help. But she's not ready to be the person on the front line to do this. The main event of this entire novel that impacts the world is the gathering, right? That's the big thing we're taking from this. It's important for many reasons. Firstly, it represents how both sides in this issue have valid points regarding prejudice of the other. There are some humans ready to accept the Forsaken as people rather than abominations, and some humans that will never accept them. This event is a great device for affirming the moral stance of Anduin. The boy king is very naive, it seems, but he's hopeful throughout the novel, and Gen is there reminding him that he is a bit foolish for thinking that this could happen and that he is underestimating Sylvanas and the Forsaken. But after the failed gathering, it seems that Anduin has been broken out of his spell of naivete and realizes that Sylvanas has to be dealt with in some way and that she is beyond saving. It outlines as well where we stand with Sylvanas. She is willing to even murder her own people to ensure her position is not jeopardized. Even Nathanos seemed a bit bothered by what happened that day, but it's a perfect demonstration of the extent Sylvanas will go to further her own goals. It shows how her relationship with the Forsaken is, in my opinion, kind of become a twisted codependency. She uses the Forsaken to justify her goals of domination, using manipulation to keep her own people loyal to her. And at some time, she even just outright gaslights them into kind of believing that their only place is in Undercity and that there's no chance of joining their loved ones and stuff like that. So we could begin to speculate here, right? Speculate a tad, but we're also extrapolating from what we've seen. Will the Forsaken begin to distrust their war chief? Will they begin to distrust Sylvanas? What is the extent that Sylvanas is willing to go to, to start a war with the Alliance and weaponize this Azerite? What will Kalia get up to after this? Will the Alliance accept her into their ranks? Or will the blinding veil of Forsaken prejudice force the others to see her as a monster? We also have to think about what's happening to Gen and Anduin after the events of the Gathering in Arathi. We also have to think about if there was actually any change that occurred as a result. I mean, after this event, will Anduin just cop out again and extend the olive branch to Sylvanas? Or will he extend Charlemagne instead? I hope Gen sort of sticks with the development that we saw at the end of the novel, where he saw Forsaken as people rather than monsters. It shows that the Gathering, although it was a disaster, it does have a small seed of hope in there, and it can be sown into the most barren of hearts. Does that mean the Gathering was actually a failure? Does it actually mean it was a failure if some hearts and minds were changed that day? I don't know. I guess we'll find out. And, of course, guys, I really want to know what you thought of this book. And you guys and gals are welcome to comment, as always, down below. To finish off, I think this novel is vital for the lore in Warcraft. Not only does it set up the next expansion, the Battle for Azeroth, it also develops some of the core characters in the upcoming story, and I can't wait to see what happens on August 14th. But if you don't play the game, I just hope it was an entertaining video for you regarding the lore of Warcraft. Like, comment, subscribe, click the bell. Do all that lovely stuff down below. If you want more World of Warcraft things, be sure to check out my other videos like, like my experience during Vanilla WoW video, or my thoughts on the previous expansion Legion. I don't just do World of Warcraft things here, I also do stuff for The Witcher, such as the chapter recaps from the book The Last Wish by Andrzej Sapkowski. I am looking to start that series up again, so if you want to catch up, feel free to click one of the links at the end screen, most likely. Yes! Thank you for watching, everyone. Be sure to share this video with your mates, and I'll catch you later.